The talk is really about Kairos moments. This is something that people tend to ignore, that Greeks have two ways of thinking of time. Chronos is just time as it goes, but sometimes we experience some special moments. You know, it can be like a conference here is a special moment that is really different from what you live every day when you are at the office. And so hackathons are, I hope I can show you that hackathons are about special moments. So the first part of my talk is about really all Kairos moments, and of course hackathons. I mean, understand hackathons can reshape societies. Back in 2023, we had there's a special conference for hackathons called Hack the Hackathon, and the number three, the version 3 of this conference was held in Geneva, and we had one day at the UN library with actually in a place where a very nice a painting called The Dream of Peace, which I think should inspire us all. And we had to tackle outstanding challenge of the UN. I mean, one is really deliver more with less resources. As you know, the UN is really under financial was already under financial stress, and actually so more so now. Was also the question of engaging citizens in new ways, which actually the UN strangely is not shaped for, because it's a consortium of states, of nation states, and not about like engaging with citizens. And then also enhance the embrace the digital era. And I think it was quite interesting, because we say of course we are hackathons guys, so we need to do hackathons for reforming the UN. And then we came with a plan that actually before the General Assembly there should be some hackathons, and then this hackathon should just feed the discussions at the UN General Assembly. But then I was like, wait, we've been trying to do hackathons for SDGs for years, and scaling is actually quite complicated. And at some point I say, hey, maybe there's already something out there that we can use that is already there. And that was the start of some research that we did a bit in a rush, because we're always late, and but in the end got published in the special issue that Dirk edited recently. And so the whole idea is say, hey, we can actually have access to a lot of data out there on a website called DevPost that is actually a repository of hackathons. So we just scrubbed the website. We downloaded more than 5,000 hackathons, more than 184K unique projects, and so on and so forth. So you can see like really a lot of things involved. Sorry, I'm just going to try to. No, I don't know how to do that. Okay, sorry. I don't know how to remove this. And then we analyzed these hackathons, and we found that actually many of these hackathons actually have a SDG component. 30% on average of these hackathons actually already carry some topics that are related to some of the SDGs of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there was kind of a revelation that actually a significant proportion of the hackathons out there are actually concerned with Sustainable Development Goals. So that's great, because we don't need to make it. It's actually already there. And you can see it's, I mean, it's quite serious in terms of human capital that has been involved even in 11 years. 140,000 participants. It's really a lot of people. It's like a big multinational. Of course, not all at the same time, not all for full time, but you can think of really a lot of effort put down. And so we looked at also hackathons, digital technologies, and the SDGs, and we found that actually you can cluster technologies and also look at them from a perspective of the SDGs, and now we have a mapping. So we say for which SDG, what kind of digital technology is there out there, and that's been developed open source, we can tell you quite precisely. And that's represented by this slide. It doesn't really matter so much for what we want, because I'm interested in social dynamics and not so much interested in technology. But actually, we decided to we had a grasp of what we call a theory of computational diplomacy, which would be about, I don't want to make it too long, but just about really about decentralized participatory process that would be focused on collaboratively designing software and to tackle global, in order to tackle global challenges. I think the missing word is hardware, because there's also hardware. And then the idea would be that, of course, this ecosystem would actually be punctuated by some kind of transient dynamics, which are the hackathons. And so we look at that, we looked at that of the data, and first thing we wanted to actually see a bit what was the engagement. So what we found is actually the typical time of a hackathon in terms of size of hackathons in terms of participants is around 60, which we know that it's a size that works quite well, not too big, not too small, and actually a lot of people in these hackathons were newbies, like up to 80% on average. So that's really new because and really nice because actually it's creating a lot of opportunity for new people to join. It's not always the same people. And then we also had some measurement of actually how many hackathons the same people would have would participate to. And we found also that actually in the end, not so many people return so much to a lot of hackathons, which is really good news if you think about it, because you know before we had some talks about blockchain and the way actually a few people actually control the blockchains. This is not the case here. We really get a lot of people and there's a lot of renewal, which I think creates some hardness, but it creates also for opportunity for really brassage, for making actually things going on fast. You know, for those who know me, I'm a very passionate person about power law distribution. So this is a nice power law distribution with an exponent of 2.35, which means that the two first moments are defined, means that actually it's not heavy tail, so it means that actually there's really a lot of renewal in the people. It's not always the same people in the same hackathons. And then we wanted to look at the punctuated dynamics associated with these SDG hackathons, and we looked at the GitHub digital traces of 7,643 projects for which we could find a GitHub repository, and we found that actually the hackathons really show big bursts in terms of repositories that are created associated with the hackathon. And of course, there's a decay, so it's a very nice power law decay. And also you look at the activity, and it's kind of the same. So super nice. And of course, for those who know, when you have an exponent that is smaller than 1, you have like exogenous critical cascades, which is really cool. If you think about it, this hackathons is like very short moment, but in the end, they contribute to up to 80% of the activity that is going to be performed online down the road. So it's not only about the moment, it's actually, this moment is actually changing the nature of the activity on the long run. And this is reminiscent to a paper we wrote with my PhD advisor, Didier Sornet, on predictive burst. And Frank, I have a slide for you just after. And the idea was actually that we find that actually the more contributors in a moment, in a short window of time, in repositories, the even more activity you will have in these repositories. So we found basically a first empirical evidence of the adage by Aristotle, the world is more than the sum of its parts. And I must say, actually, it was very funny because Frank and Didier's group, we were like in the same corridor, and we ended up having a very nice fight. Frank's point was actually, no, this is not the world is more than the sum of its parts. It's actually a Ringgold-Martin effect. The more people, the less productivity you will have. And so we exchanged things. And actually another group from USC in the end settled in our favor. Sorry, Frank. But if you want, we can continue challenging. But I think the idea is that actually you really get a wall is more than the sum of its parts effect in this open source moment. But I think the thing that at the time we didn't know is that this wall is more than the sum of its parts effect was actually mainly due to the hackathons. And that actually is the new thing. So there are some considerations for future society before I go on to other results. But I think you can, first things actually, these decentralized societies for good, they already exist. It's not about like designing the future. It's just already there, and there's already critical mass. And they produce super linearly through these Kairos moments, which is cool, because really, it's really an increase of productivity. And then it leaves much spaces for newcomers, possibly through renewal. And that's also cool, because it's not like people seeking a rent. It's actually really about like just people getting involved where they really think they can make a point. And then it offers a new ecosystemic paradigm for the decentralized shaping of institutions. Of course, when I mean institutions here, I'm especially interested in the multilateral system in the United Nations, because it happens I live in Geneva. So yet they remain largely invisible. So it's really underground, it's messy, and so it's very hard to actually harness this power, because it's just a lot of hackathons out there, and we need to make better sense of actually how they unravel, how they actually impact, really the shaping of digital societies. And I think I have a mission here, especially in Geneva, is to really show legacy institutions like the UN that they just ignore and that they should do better in actually leveraging this power. Because actually, let's say, you don't have any money, but you have a lot of people out there that are really keen on the UN. They really think it's a really amazing thing that has been invented in the 20th century, and they want to keep it. I'm in Geneva, nobody really cares about the UN. But you go to Asia, you go to other countries, they really put a lot of faith in the United Nations and the multilateral system. And these people, they are smart. Some of them are really smart and they want to help. So how can we really tap into this power to actually upgrade the UN and also make it just more close to the beneficiaries and the citizens? So big mission for me. I want to have two more topics. I'm trying to go super fast, but I want to show you a bit under the hood of a hackathon for good. And that's something we started a while ago, because actually when I was presenting some results where people saying, well, actually what's going on during a hackathon? And actually this is super hard because it's super messy. How do you actually measure what's going on when people meet in a place? It's a lot of weak signals, small signals that we don't understand very well. And that's really the topic of the remaining of my talk. So we actually decided to do sort of like economic style, we wanted to actually, so no big complex system science. We did pre-survey and post-survey. So we set up like a survey system where we actually would just ask people, what do they expect before the hackathon? And then what do they experience? And we tested for a lot of things, but I want to report on three things. One, it was motivation. And I'm really thankful for Regular at this stage, because you had this slide with Joseph Stiglitz saying that we should rethink economy in a way that would be more empathic, more other regarding, I think, something like that, more about like collective, and also more respect. Sorry, I didn't have time to take a picture and to recall all of it, but there was something like that. And I think it's like, for me at this point, it resonates a lot. So we looked at this motivation, and what we found is actually, I'm sorry, that before the hackathon, you would have three categories. One is actually extrinsically motivated people, then intrinsically motivated people, and a mix of intrinsic and extrinsic. It was really based on some keywords and some questions that we were performing during the survey. And then we had like sort of like analogous questions after the hackathons to actually see how it would evolve. And what we found is actually with time and in a consistent way and significant way is actually the hackathons turning people into more intrinsically motivated. You keep the same amount of people who are extrinsically motivated, but you see there's a bit of change. So some people are switching, and that's fine. But in the end, because actually they had some preconception of the hackathon, and of course after the fact they would change. But what we see that there's a little bit more of people who are actually intrinsically motivated after the hackathon. So that's actually quite nice. And then we wanted to look at the higher purpose. Of course, if you do hackathon for good, you want to actually understand if there's any signal about what do we mean by for good. And in management literature now, they have this way of talking about grand challenges, all society, and how do you actually set up management for grand challenges. So we actually ask questions for these higher purpose goals and grand challenges. We found that actually a lot of people who participated, they consistently said before and after that actually higher purpose was actually very important to them. And we try to measure with limited statistical significance whether higher purpose, as it would be perceived by people, would actually increase the commitment in time in the hackathon. Because people who are not motivated, they may just drop out earlier, or they might go, and then we find a tiny signal. I'm not super confident to show you that, but there's still like a little bit of something that need to be refined. That in the end, it seems that if people are more into higher purpose, they are going to actually commit more time, which is the currency in our case. So also play is something that we really thought is important, because it's all about what people do because they play, because they're intrinsically motivated is again like some kind of human resources that you don't need to pay for. It's not about profiteering. It's actually putting people in actually an environment that's going to be nice. And so we tested playfulness for again, safe playground to experiment. So whether people would just actually consider the hackathon as a place for experimenting without judgment by others, whether it would be a fun experience, just having joy. I think that was in actually the slide of on Stiglitz. An unusual interaction means actually meeting with people they don't know, like meaning diversity of perspectives of different people, and then also unleash creativity. And we find that actually, yeah, indeed, people actually really value hackathons for these three different dimensions, which is nice. Which with an increase for the two first increase pre and post. So it means that people come with a slightly lower. Um, we started later, Dirk. So slightly lower expectation before, and then they say, well, it was actually the case. Maybe I make it in 2 minutes. I want to say, finally, this is management, and it's not so hard, and we don't recapture the signals. And I want to do a little detour, because sometimes advancing in science needs to actually go for detours. At some point, some people know this paper by Anita Woolley and others on collective intelligence, where they came up with this definition of collective intelligence. But there's something really nice with this paper. It's actually the best predictor for collective intelligence was this test, the read the mind in the eyes test. This capacity to sense the emotions of the other, means empathy, was actually the best predictor for collective intelligence, much better than IQ or total IQ. And it happens that actually the reading mind in the eyes test was actually created by a child psychiatrist, Baron Cohen, the brother of the famous actor. But it was for autistic kids. And it happens that my wife is actually a child psychiatrist, and at some point we decided that we are going to work together. And we decided that we are going to work together on digital phenotyping of social interactions, or the absence of social interactions for autism. And so you see here a demo of how we actually use computer vision, non-invasive way, actually for capturing social interaction. So you see my son here playing bubble, and with a clinician, and then you see actually we did pose estimation that everyone knows, and then privacy preserving. We removed all the context, and then we started to work on these skeletons. And the question was, can we say something about social interactions just using these skeletons? And the answer is, well, first you might want to know whether we can predict autism this way, and the answer is yes, with accuracy more than 80%, but that's not the topic of this talk. We actually got into actually trying to understand whether with these skeletons we can actually make sense of the different social possible social different social interaction that you can see in a video. So we looked at 90 videos of children, 60%, 60 were ASD, 30 were typically developing for 10 minutes, and we did a machine learning pipeline from the video to the pose estimation, to developed an encoder we call Lisbeth. We did that with neuroscientists doing mice, and then we actually tried to, which is self-supervising learning, so it's no, and then we actually did some clustering, and that we found, which is quite amazing, that we can find 80-fold different clusters of social behaviors that define actually the way people interact. We tested for autism or not, means for whether there are enhanced social interactions or not. And then for each of these clusters, we can really say whether the cluster is really, highlighting the lack of social interaction or or social interactions in general. I'm done. This is, instead of having concluding remarks, it seems that every talk needs now a boring DAL-E image. So I could not refrain myself for doing that, but this is actually for concluding my talk. Thank you so much.